Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast for September 28th, 2014. This is episode 84, and I'm JD Duran.
I am Blake Pertuzit.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Finally, for the first time ever, fellas, we have all three co-hosts of the InSession Film Podcast under one roof.
Dude,
It's exciting.
the InSession Film Sausage Fest.
What? Oh, what the what?
I don't know if I would call it that, but it should be pretty fun.
Well, I mean, it's
it is now.
It's not that. Like, yeah, he's literally like tweeting it right now. Hashtag InSession Film Sausage Fest. And the problem is there's more than 140 characters in that one hashtag, so it's not going to work out. You'll never have to listen to that.
I'll make it work. I'll abbreviate it if I have to.
Oh.
But this should be a fun show, though. So we are a podcast, three co-hosts on the podcast, and we are talking about a film that came from another podcast. And this week we are discussing Kevin Smith's Tusk, which should be pretty interesting. And going off of that, we're going to be talking about our top 3 disturbing scenes in film, which Blake will have a lot to talk about for that scene.
I don't want to.
Yeah.
You've been traumatized? Is that it?
I'm seriously like I need to like just sit in a cold shower for like a week.
Yeah.
Cleanse all your sins.
Yeah.
I mean, I need Dr. Phil to hypnotize me is what I need.
It's not the most fun of topics,
No,
I'll give you that. But
Perception is reality.
it should be a good discussion either way.
Yeah.
And as we talked about last week on the show, our third segment, very, very new with what we're doing in that segment. This week, we're doing a new segment called Trailer Talk. We're going to talk about some of the latest trailers that we've seen recently, and I look forward to getting into that as well. But before we get into it, fellas, how was your guys' week?
Going pretty good. Good weekend, I gotta say. I just had some friends come visit me from Pittsburgh. One of them I went to college with, one of my dear friends from college, and I don't really remember what happened this weekend, so it was that good.
that's usually a good sign.
Yeah. I just hope I didn't drive.
Let's hope. You hope you didn't. You're like, I remember the last time I don't remember.
It was just a few weeks ago.
Actually, that's a bit ironic. Although I have to say, I'm very sad to report that Penn State had a really terrible game this weekend.
They did.
Unfortunately, they
Welcome
were favored
to my life.
Yeah, they were favored to win by like 10 points, and that was a very brutal obliteration they had at home yet too. I can't believe that happened. That sucked.
Again, I feel you.
Yeah, and now I feel your pain because Michigan still sucks.
Yeah, this is true. You know, well, at least. And in my situation here, the best tackle in the entire game came from our strength coach, Anthony Schlegel.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah,
Have you seen the Photoshop though?
No,
where somebody got
a
a hold of it, and people were on Reddit were going around saying it looks like he's giving the dude the rock bottom, and so they photoshopped John Cena getting the rock bottom into it from Anthony Schlegel, and he's like, like in his trunks or whatever, he's like up in the air, like flying down to the ground. Stone Cold Steve Austin tweeted about it and said, like, that gets automatically the best tackle of the game and worth the game ball. That's definitely a good rock bottom or whatever. It was hilarious.
The fact that it came from Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Well, and he approves.
It says a lot.
Yeah.
That's a good check mark right there.
Yeah, man, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
My cousins actually got to go to that game here.
Oh,
it was
really?
like taking pictures of everything and said it was amazing when it happened. They were chanting.
Incredible.
Yeah, I didn't get to see the game, but it's amazing that this Big Ten fans and different teams are in one room.
I know.
Not throwing punches at each other, but we're in the heart of SEC country.
I know.
Yep.
And
Crazy.
it doesn't make sense. But it's good regardless here. It's
It
good
is
times.
good. Yeah, we can all agree that the SEC sucks, right? Or are
Sure.
we not going to go that way?
Or
Are we going to be killed by all these
I'll
Kentucky-
agree with portions of the SEC.
I was waiting for like the cricket sound effect there. I was like, I don't really think we're in a position to say that kind of stuff right now.
I know.
The
Big Ten is terrible.
I think let's look for the red light coming through the window. There's going to be some snipers at us right now after that. Yeah.
No,
that's
the Big Ten
definitely-
is the worst.
Yeah, it's terrible right now.
How was your week, Blake, though?
Oh man, it's over.
It's over. There you go. Moving on to a new one.
That's about the most I got to say for it. Oh, that's just did you watch Arrested Development at all? Well then you suck. What I was getting at, the scene's like you just feel like I'm walking along with my head down with the sad Charlie Brown music playing in the background, and like I walk in the door and just immediately just fall down and collapse, and I'm like, I just want to go to bed now, and that's it. Yeah, it was one of those kind of weeks. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
yeah, it's okay. Obviously I'm in better spirits now.
Yeah.
So let's just start a new one.
Yeah.
Gave you some time to watch some really disturbing movie scenes.
That probably had a lot to do with it.
That could have been part of it. It was definitely, Well, that's a whole different.
Yeah.
That could be a
Next
whole
week
different
we'll talk
podcast.
fun movies
It's gonna be the
and
therapy session.
fun
Yes, I'm gonna need lots and lots of happy stuff.
Next week we'll talk about our top 3 happy times in film.
Right. I'm also gonna
Happiest
probably
moments.
give me probably some Xanax along the way. I'm kidding. I do not support drug use.
My week was also pretty good. Very busy. As a lot of people know, I went to Ann Arbor to watch the Michigan debacle this last weekend.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
It was awful.
Good words.
But debacle, as bad as the word debacle is, it still doesn't really fully describe what happened, even just by driving across the city limits of Ann Arbor.
Yeah, it's a bit of an understatement.
Oh my God! It is. First of all, I knew it was going to be a bad trip when it took us what felt like 16 hours to get through the state of Indiana, because every 5 minutes there was construction. And I even tweeted the state government on Twitter, and I said, "Your state sucks. I'm never coming through this damn state ever again."
You get a reply. Please
No,
tell me.
not yet. But I was like, "This is the worst." So I just knew it was going to be terrible.
You're going to be on like Indiana's most wanted list now. They won't let you back.
Oh my God, I hated it. But it was. I knew it was going. I knew the game was going to be probably the worst. But what was really disappointing is that the crowd, while there was still 102,000 people there, you could feel the deflation in the crowd. Like, even from the very beginning, everyone was like, we know what we're getting into. This is probably not going to be fun. But you still love your team and you still support them, but it was just trash.
Right.
And then, of course, that moment with Shane Morris, that happened on our end of the end zone. So when he got clobbered there, it was literally, and we were row 17, so we had some pretty good seats.
Sure.
And it was right in front of us. And as soon as he got up, I mean, he had no idea where he was.
Yeah.
And, of course, then he leans on the lineman, and the coaches keep him in. And even in the crowd, without knowing all the details that TV gives you, we were like, what the hell are you doing? Take this guy out of the game. He really shouldn't have even been in there to begin with, because he was playing really terrible. He should have been pulled way earlier than that. But, oh, my gosh, it's the Michigan football right now. It couldn't be in a worse state.
I feel like that's what we're reviewing on this podcast instead.
Yeah, I know.
We are going to get to movies here.
Right. I do.
I had to vent, though.
Yeah.
So at the end, we give the Michigan game a D.
Exactly.
No. There was no D in that game.
Yeah, no.
Touche.
The funny thing is, though, our defense actually is decent, but it's our offense. Anyway, I'm not
Anyway,
gonna get into
yeah,
that.
we agree.
So,
Right.
so let's move on to something a little bit different. So,
yes.
there's another podcast out there that's very, very good friends of ours. We love these guys a lot. They've been on our show a few different times, and it's the Geek Scholars Movie News Podcast. If you don't listen to them, go listen to them. It's a great show. But on episode 158 of their show, Chris from that show threw out a little bit of punch towards us. This is what he had to say.
So in limited release, I got the first one for you here is Tusk. This one's rated R, and it's a Kevin Smith horror movie about a podcaster played by Justin Long who is targeted by a psycho killer. I guess I should mention here that if any of our listeners are psycho killers, I just want you to know that we appreciate you, we agree that you're just misunderstood, and we are totally on your side. Unlike those guys at InSession Film Podcast who are totally talking bad about you behind your back, you should really take that up with JD.
Nice.
Heads up, buddy.
All right, now, Chris, I have to throw this out there. First of all, I feel like of all of our podcasts out there, I would say ours is one of the tamest out there. We're not really aggressive or throwing a lot of punches unless it's Michigan football. So,
Or Michael Bay. I throw lots of punches.
Or Michael Bay.
Yeah.
So unless it's Michael Bay that is looking to kill someone,
Right. We will never get around my unabashed hate for either Michael Bay or Michigan football.
I'm not talking crap about anyone. So Chris, you and I, we're gonna throw down here a little bit. So
I cannot wait to see that happen.
That's going to be really interesting. Yeah. But I will say I'm not afraid. I do not support serial killers. I'm gonna take a statement of that. My name is Blake Pertusit, and I do not support serial killers.
me either. So
I might.
But JD's the one to attack.
no, yeah. Well, yeah, I guess.
Well, you'll be the one in the ring.
Right.
Look, we love everybody. Okay, we're like Will Ferrell and what was the basketball movie? ELE, everybody.
Oh,
ELE,
yeah.
everybody love everybody. So that's where I stand on all of that. But again, thanks, Chris, for the shout out, even though we don't condone attacking serial killers.
I
So-
do.
I totally attack serial killers. I'm not in support of that. Chris. I'm on the same page with you, buddy. No, except for not necessarily with the whole JD thing. Like I kind of need him around. He's the actual official, the business end of things over here. I've got nowhere to go.
Yeah, I think we'd be out of a job without this guy here. Yeah,
exactly. So. All right, well, before we get into it, the last thing I just want to say real fast is go check out our latest extra film segment where we talked about Cold in July. Brennan and I did. We talked about Cold in July and Liam Neeson's latest, A Walk Among the Tombstones, or as Blake likes to say it,
Liam Neeson with a Gun, Part 6.
So there you go. Definitely go and check that out. All right, guys, let's get into Tusk. Let's get into it.
And here we go.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 84. Blake, how far is it to Bifrost?
Oh, that's far. It's about 2 hours.
Welcome to Canada. Bro. Hey there. Are you there yourself, fellow facial hair aficionado?
Yeah, not as good as you. My God.
New Jersey, eh?
Yeah, years back. Now it's Los Angeles.
A man torn betwixt devils and kings. Oh! Hockey. Yeah, you're damn right, hockey.
Don't really follow hockey.
Okay. Hands off the counter, please.
Really?
Yeah, really. Thank you.
Sorry.
Sorry. When you're visiting the Great White North of Canada, you got your can of do's and you got your can of don'ts. Top shelf right there, number one. Don't go telling a Canadian you don't follow hockey.
Oh, of course. I should have known that. Makes him sad, right?
Canadian doesn't get sad. Sadness was made by the USA.
All right, Tusk is written and directed by Kevin Smith and stars Justin Long, Michael Parks, Haley Joel Osment, and a few other people as well. All right, I'll toss it to you guys first. What did you think about Tusk?
First question I gotta ask: what the heck happened to Haley Joel Osment?
Years of unemployment.
That's what I would hope it was.
Yeah.
Oh
like,
my
boy,
God.
He's got a face.
He does. He's got a neck too.
I thought I had a big head, but damn, Gina.
I just had to break the ice with that question.
He does look very different from his younger days.
He really does. And
This time when he sees dead people, it's himself in 5 years.
or when he's not a robot.
Wow.
He's gonna start seeing himself. I mean, it's a sixth senseception.
It makes sense. It's just a mirror.
Wow.
So anyway, that's point one.
Wow.
The second thing I want to say is that the second that this movie started playing, or even before I went to go see it, I was counting down, waiting for something to happen. And thank God it did.
Right.
And that was to play the song Tusk by Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, on the soundtrack.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
has
I'm
to
thinking,
be.
okay,
Yeah.
because I didn't even know what the soundtrack consisted of. I just went in going, they better play this song because they have to play this song.
Yes.
And they do. So I
course.
was happy to see that. The third thing I will mention, JD, this has been a theme constantly on our InSession Film Podcasts.
Really has,
For extra film stuff. This is like another tale of two halves. At least it was for me. I thought the first half of this movie is excruciatingly funny. It really is, and I'm just going to throw this out there. I don't know what you guys think, but I'm not a huge Kevin Smith fan. I like Clerks. I like Clerks 2. I enjoyed Chasing Amy. That's really about it. from everything else I've seen. I'm not a huge fan of his. Having said that, this movie I was in stitches in a lot of moments of this movie, especially the
no pun intended.
Yeah. I didn't even try to do that. But
I see what you did there.
But it's like, especially in the first sequence after their first podcast, and he's going to Canada, and he's at the airport in Canada. That we could talk about that scene all day.
Yeah,
it is hilarious.
Very good.
And even the interactions between Justin Long and Michael Parks, I think his name is. The dialogue is just so interesting, and I love their exchanges together. And then even when it kind of starts veering into the whole, like disturbing horror movie kind of thing, it still maintained a lot of humor throughout, and I thought that was fine. I feel like more than anything, this movie was at least like 20 minutes or even half an hour too long. There are scenes toward the second half it really started dragging out a bit for me. I think that I won't go into spoilers obviously, but they do show something to the audience. It's kind of a bit of a visual reveal about halfway through that I think they really should have waited towards the climax of the film. I think it gave away a lot of suspense for me. I think they should have like pushed that off a little bit. But having said that, I was very surprised that I did have a pretty good time with this movie. I like the whole podcast segment of it, so I was able to relate to it in that regard.
Sure, yeah.
But what do you guys think? I mean, I kind of enjoyed it. I was very surprised by it.
Yeah, I'll go off of that. I kind of agree with you as far as the two halves thing goes there.
Sure.
I actually have been a pretty big Kevin Smith fan most of my life here.
That's fine.
A lot of his other films that he's done, well, of course, he had his Jersey trilogy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then it came from a whole lot of dick and fart jokes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We get it. Jay and Silent Bob. Love it, though. But a lot of it, there was a lot of smart, thoughtful writing behind a lot of it as well.
Yeah.
He's great. I liken him in a way with Tarantino as far as the way he plans out his dialogue and the way a lot of those things take place. And you see that in this movie as well.
Yeah.
And he consulted him a little bit in this too. But some of his even darker stuff, like I don't know if you've seen Red State or not.
I have not, no.
But I highly recommend it. It's on Netflix right now. If you
it is? Okay.
It's a great movie. Michael Parks, again, amazing performance in that. And somehow, I don't know if it's just Kevin Smith knows how to get the absolute best out of him or not, but it's amazing because his performance in Tusk as well was just through the roof, the way he portrayed that character. But yeah, it's like the first half was a whole lot more lighthearted, and it has this kind of a silly concept to it.
Yeah.
And then when it takes its turn, it's not that at all anymore. I mean, there's a few little things in there.
Sure.
But I will definitely agree. I think that it should have been more of a third act reveal as far as that. I would have liked to have seen, even though there's some, grotesque imagery and things like that throughout the process, and everybody knows what the whole idea is here, but I would have liked to have seen a few more stages of that.
Like it was kind of building towards it,
I'd seen it maybe build towards a much bigger crescendo and have it maybe carry more weight at that point.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that you got to kind of raise the stakes in a movie like this here and build towards seeing something that's going to be that crazy. But it's kind of the exact opposite way me and JD kind of felt about with Godzilla. It's like there was such a slow burn until it happened there, and then when they finally did the big. It's in any movie that there's one big thing you're waiting for.
Yeah,
which obviously is this here. It needs to have a little bit more weight to it.
I agree.
So that was my only real complaint towards it. I mean, and again, you're talking about a movie that's just based off of a ridiculous idea that came from a podcast where they read this. It was a fake, posting in a newspaper in England, which I'm sure we can get into later on about the whole idea of how it came about. But it's a silly idea from a podcast. What I do like though is that Kevin Smith went to his fans who were incredibly loyal and put it to the masses and said, "Hey, if you guys want to see this happen, let's hear it."
Yeah.
And I'll find. I mean, Jennifer Schwalbach, his wife, is the producer. That's who put up the money to make this.
Right.
It's not like he went to all these big studios and like around Hollywood for money.
Yeah.
And it made nothing at the box office, but his fans are appeased. And if nothing else, there's that.
Sure. I mean, Veronica Mars was sort of similar this year, too.
Right.
Yep.
And those fans were very much pleased. And so it's very much in the same vein. Much like you were saying, Blake, this came from his podcast. It was an idea based off of this fake thing from England, as you were talking about. And they had an interesting discussion about it on their podcast. I don't know if you guys ever actually listened to that show, but it was pretty interesting. And he brought up some really unique ideas regarding what they wanted to do with this movie. I think for me in this film, it sounds like you guys enjoyed it a little bit more than I did. I think overall, it should have stayed a podcast discussion because that was interesting. It was funny. And to me, I think there just wasn't enough meat surrounding this to make it a full length feature.
Oh, you had to say meat, didn't you?
I did have to say meat. So
Stitches
sorry.
and meat.
I will say it is an interesting premise, but I don't know if there was enough of a story here. And it goes back to something that you were saying, Brendan, and that you felt maybe it was 20 minutes too long. And you feel that because there's not enough narrative here to really stretch it to the full length that we got here. It was just too thin. And you see that with the development of the characters and really with the story that's going on. They tried to stretch it out as far as they possibly could. And I think that really hurt the film in the second half. There is some really great writing in the first half, as you were talking about. It's really funny. The podcast stuff is really interesting. Even the name of the podcast is kind of funny. They play off that throughout the film. And all of that I thought was enjoyable. Michael Parks is really great in this. And I love when he ends up meeting with Justin Long's character. That whole scenario for me was very intriguing. And you could tell that Michael Parks, in the way that he plays this, he really had some interesting stories to tell. But really behind all of that charisma that he was displaying in this character, he was also hiding something.
Right.
And I thought that mystery and the way that it plays in the Justin Long's character, I thought was great. And Justin Long's character didn't see it. He bought into the charisma, I think, as we all did. And then, of course, once he passes out, at that point, you know, all right, here we go. Something is about to happen. And where it goes from there, it worked for me and it didn't work for me. But, I mean, I'll toss it to you guys a little bit more. But I think overall, this is more of a miss than it is a hit for me.
Okay, I think I'm kind of towards the other direction. And I think it really was more of a hit for me. I think I will agree. I mean, the first half, as I mentioned earlier, it really, I think, is very consistent. Even when it does make that turn into, grotesque horror movie, kind of, disturbing, whatever you want to call it, I still think it retained enough of that humor and smart writing that it still felt consistent for me. It didn't feel like it became a totally different movie for me. And throughout the whole movie, it really didn't feel that way. My real criticism is that, as I mentioned, and we were talking about earlier, there wasn't enough weight for that reveal.
Right.
It just, I felt like that they put that up too soon. It took away a lot of the suspense. And having said that, though, I do think most of the second half, there's a scene where they meet the private investigator who is brilliantly played by an awesome actor. I guess he's on the IMDb page. I guess it's okay if we say that's Johnny Depp.
Yes, Johnny Depp.
But it goes on for way too long, I think, and that's where I really started getting myself lost with the movie and started losing all the suspense from it too, because by that moment we did have that visual reveal that we were talking about, and I think we still needed something to keep the audience invested from a mystery angle, and it kind of took us away from that, I think.
Yeah, I think that it stepped away from that for too long. I mean, I understand you want to have a little bit of exposition, and you also, unfortunately, want to kind of fill some time at that point. And not to say if it was in a totally separate scenario in a different movie, even like that portrayal, that those scenes, I think were great.
Yeah,
but it just in this setting here, it made it feel like the movie didn't know what it wanted to be for a while there. Like it jumped back and forth too much. Which is
some of my biggest problems with it.
And it didn't. I mean, I understand, like, if you're moving the comedy, you're moving towards this horror aspect here. You want to trickle a little bit of things in there so it's smooth. But it was like two separate movies at a point there. Now again, like if it was two separate movies, I loved the scene. The scene with Johnny Depp and Michael Parks. Yeah, Michael Parks is playing like a different character at that point.
Yeah, like a very simple-minded,
fellow. I thought it was just amazing. I thought it was hilarious the way he was acting. Like, I love the scene itself, but in that same respect, it's just like a couple of different scenes. It's not like a through a movie there. It's just, and it falls apart a little bit. But still, I agree with you, Brendan. It's more of a hit than a miss for me. But there's faults with it. But
it's not perfect. No.
I mean, I didn't expect it to be. When you go into a movie like this, we're certainly not looking for Oscars here.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think for me, while it is more of a miss than a hit, I will say I do think that it accomplishes what it sets out to. And it really just soaks in its bizarreness, and it lingers in that strange awkwardness that the world builds. And I do think the build up to that is really well done, as we talked about. But for me, like you were saying, Blake, it really does feel like two different movies. And I love Johnny Depp in this role. I think he is fantastic. He's really funny. In fact, when I walked out of the theater, the people that I went to see it with, I said, I think this is my favorite Johnny Depp performance I've seen in a really long time.
It's the first time he's not playing Captain Jack Sparrow.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have any white makeup on.
Exactly. So I thought he was really great. But at the same time, I don't think he belonged there at all, because by the time his character shows up, the turn into the insanity had already happened, and it's kind of also lingering in the horrorness of it. It's kind of moved away from the comedic aspects. So when we see Johnny Depp's character, it really took away from that, and it became very messy at that point. And like you were saying, Blake, it didn't know exactly what it wanted to do. It was trying to weave from this comedic aspects to the horror aspects, and the horror aspects was pretty shocking. It was very disturbing with the stuff that was going on there.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see more from the Michael Parks character and just kind of the craziness that that just kind of surrounds who this guy is, which that to me was intriguing. And then you introduce this guy that to me just really took away from, I thought, what was great about the film, and it just really took me out.
See, I don't think the introduction of the private investigator played by Johnny Depp kind of did that. I think what really did that, as I mentioned earlier, was that visual reveal. I think because that suspense and mystery was gone, and because I really think Kevin Smith did a great job in the first half of this film, blending that comedy and that horror aspect and making it seem like it was actually kind of a single piece. It didn't feel disjointed or anything like that. I thought it was very consistent. It's just by the time that second half came along, I think, Blake, I think it was you that mentioned it, that it just felt like it didn't really know where it wanted to go then. It kind of lost its touch on what it was trying to do. And I did like a lot of the situational parallels, I guess, between, Haley Joel Osment's character and Justin Long's character, the kind of podcast that they do, and basically, kind of like poke fun at individuals that do weird things. So then when he's kind of put in that own position himself, it's kind of, there's some neat things where you kind of, as the audience, kind of think about that. It's like, oh, okay, so what's he going to think about now that he's in their own shoes of the people that they were kind of poking fun at for their job?
Sure.
So I kind of like that little parallel. It kind of addresses it. It doesn't really address it. I just thought it was a neat little thing to think about from our own end. And I thought Kevin Smith did a good job kind of marrying that kind of aspect, at least with the first half of this film. But maybe a little bit more than the first half of this film. But having said that, though, I do think he does make the misstep in kind of veering off and just kind of making it just segues and zigzags a bit in the second half that it really doesn't know where it wants to go then. And it is a bit disappointing there, but I still went with it for most of it.
Yeah, I mean, I get the exposition, and I kind of like a little bit of the past being explored a little bit, explaining that this is not the first time this has happened. This is a repeat thing, whatever.
Yeah.
This is a serial killer type person or whatever from that. I get all that, but yeah, it was a little bit too disjointed at that part. There were a lot of other things that I did like about it, but it all comes back to, like we keep talking about, that big reveal too early. There's the one big thing we're waiting for, and I would have been a whole lot happier though if we have more just dialogue between Justin Long and Michael Parks before one of them actually can no longer speak. I would have been a whole lot more fun. What I will definitely give credit to is Justin Long's performance in this movie, because what he does great in the first half here as his character Wallace is really good at playing that kind of like. He started out low and then ended up, kind of making a lot of money from this whole thing here and kind of turned into a douchebag, rich guy, whatever. Yeah. He played that really well. But for the second half of the movie, he's pretty much doing all his acting with his eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's still, I mean, you can still see him in there, and it still works for the most part. But it's just, you want to, from just a film watching standpoint, to go on this journey with it and stay with it. But there's still so many points where you're like, what the hell am I watching? Sure. I had a hard time, and I got it a couple of times with it. And even though now, I've had time to think about it, I overall pretty much liked it. But I literally a couple of times thought about I had hopes for this here, but I don't know what the hell's going on, and I don't know if I really need to sit here anymore.
I mean, when that big reveal happens, at the end of the year, it's just going to be one of those things you don't forget. It's going to be very standout for sure.
Yeah, and I'll completely agree. I do think Justin Long does give a great performance here because he always, without spoiling too much, he has to act with his eyes. It's all he's able to do, and it's convincing. It really is.
I think for me, when you guys are talking about the reveal and it possibly being there a little bit too early, I can sort of buy into that argument a little bit. Although I would have preferred that they kept that and maybe extended that out or did more there than the introduction of the Johnny Depp character, or at least lessen the Johnny Depp character, because those elements to me, I think, is what's fascinating about it. And specifically Michael Parks. I would have wanted to explore this guy a little bit more, because I do think in a lot of ways, especially when we first meet him, he's really endearing. And when he's talking about these stories he has to tell, it's pretty intriguing, even if he is making up a lot of it. Mm-hmm. But he does reveal a lot about himself, to why he is a little bit of a lunatic and why he goes about doing the things that he's doing. Mm-hmm. He does have reasons that justify his actions. Now, whether you buy into that or not is a very different story. But there's a poignancy about it at the same time. It's very emotional. It's something that's really close to his heart. And I think if they would have explored that a little bit more, I would have been really intrigued to see that. And especially if, like what you're saying, Blake, if they extended out a little bit more of the build up to the reveal, because those interactions between the two of them, we don't get enough of them.
Right.
And I would have liked to see more because when Justin Long, his character is freaking out, for very good reasons.
Yeah.
There's some great tension there, but we don't get enough of it. And then it goes back to the comedic side of things, which to me felt very messy. And I just didn't, as much as I enjoyed Johnny Depp, it didn't need to be there, I don't think.
Yeah, and I really think that if it did do that and explore more of the dialogue and that kind of tension between Justin Long and Michael Parks, and then at the same time still introducing the Johnny Depp character the way they did, but if that reveal hadn't come yet, I think the movie would have overall still worked.
Yeah,
it really
I could
came
kinda
down
see
to
that,
when
sure.
Kevin Smith decided to explore certain plot points and when he wanted to start progressing things along.
Sure.
The other thing I do want to talk about, and we kind of touched about it a little bit, at least with like the first half here, is that the movie is actually pretty well made. From a horror standpoint, there are some pretty interesting ways Kevin Smith does a good job creating tension here. There's a scene where it's a scene completely in the dark when Justin Long is making his phone calls to his girlfriend and his friend.
That scene completely worked for me.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But it was really well made, really quiet, and very visceral too. And you knew Michael Parks was somewhere watching him, but you didn't know when or how it was going to come out. And it's done pretty well.
It's really well staged.
It
which
really
is. The big
is.
thing.
Yeah. And that's not something you see a lot in horror films, especially from someone who's not really accustomed to making horror films. I mean, this is only, as far as I know, Kevin Smith's second horror film. Is it?
I think first. I don't think he's done anything
What about
else
Red
before.
State?
Red State was not a horror film.
Okay, I don't know much about it then. So
it's more of a thriller type movie here,
Okay.
but it's definitely a serious type movie.
Okay,
But it's not a horror film.
Okay, and I stand corrected there. Then, from really first horror film, I guess you can say. But but he does a good job from a filmmaking standpoint. I was really into it just from that regard.
Yeah, in general, I kind of like the horror genre a little bit, but I think that more directors and people like that who don't make horror films, I think should explore that because we would get some good direction with that.
We
instead
get something
of
different.
everything else. It seems like these days there's nothing good really that comes out. It's all kind of the same fare over and over and over, and nothing really ever stands out a whole lot. I mean, there may be like one a year that's like can get your attention, but it's the same generic stuff over and over.
Right.
But yeah, that scene you're talking about, I thought was really well shot, really well acted, and it was great. Waiting for that crescendo to happen there. That you knew at some point in that scene, Justin Long was going to get knocked over the head with a walrus dick.
We were just waiting for it.
It's not quite as scary anymore now.
Anymore. It's scary, but like when you put it like that, it's like that. What?
Sure.
It makes it really ironic. Yeah.
Well, we do got to get moving on here pretty soon, but I want to ask you about the climax of the film, which does have some tension definitely throughout there. For me, it was more heartbreaking than I would say satisfying or horrific, because you are kind of talking about humanity and identity and kind of what that means, and it really explores a little bit of that, like I said, with the Parks character, but even more so, I feel like, with what happens to Justin Long. But what do you guys think about the climax of the film? And even the ending a little bit as well, if you guys want to go into that. Because I do think they are related.
Yeah. Well, I'll go first to this one. I think that it is kind of weird because at a moment there, you feel for the character for a while there, and then you wonder, what's the outcome going to be here? And then you really, when you stop and think about it, it is sort of dipping down to man becoming beast. Like he gives up. I mean, he completely gives up at some point there and takes on this new role. I mean, at some point there, he is no longer a man, quite literally, psychologically at that point there. So yeah, it's completely. It's kind of heartbreaking, like you said there at that point.
Yeah.
I will say though, without spoiling anything, that I think at that last scene there, after the big sort of fight sequence or whatever, when the three other characters show up, I think it should have ended right there. I think that it should have ended right there, because when it comes back and you get like the actual true ending of the film, there's absolutely no way. That's too effed up an idea to even exist for them to. No, I didn't like the idea of that, the way that took place. I could have done without that. I would have been happier if we just cut to black, whether we have a sound effect after that or not. Fine, but I would have rather.
I could totally see that. I guess the one thing that I'll sort of disagree on. Well, maybe not disagree isn't the right word, but I'll say one of the most interesting things about the podcast version of this was them talking about the ending, which they were very true to. Like if you watch the film and listen to the podcast at the exact same time, it is verbatim, word for word,
Really?
which I think was pretty interesting. And I think it plays into some of the themes I'll talk about a little bit more. I'll let you finish up though, but I actually really liked the way that it ended.
I feel like I'm kind of in both of your territories on this one, because at one point I do like the poignancy of it. I do like what I feel like what Kevin Smith was trying to say with that ending, and I thought he conveyed it really well. But having said that, though, I do feel like from a filmmaking standpoint, from a kind of like from a genre standpoint, it felt like it existed in another movie. And I guess that's what you're talking about mostly, JD, is as far as your criticism with this movie, is that it kind of felt like it was two different movies and two different tones and things like that. That scene at the very last scene of this movie did kind of feel like that for me. Even though the poignancy I did kind of notice and I did kind of relate to it, I guess, it did feel like it was structured as it was from a different movie. And I wasn't quite sure. In many ways, I guess I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, that I really am not sure if I felt like it really belonged there or not.
The reason you feel that is because that was the ending that they had the entire time. And this is my problem with the movie, is that narratively, they didn't have a hole going into this.
Yeah.
They had this interesting premise and a nice setup, and then they had the ending that they talked about on their show, and everything in the middle was kind of like, well, we'll make this up as we go, and I think that's why it feels so disjointed.
Well, it feels like it's almost kind of like it was phoned in at that point. Like they knew how they wanted to arrive at that point, but they didn't. I guess then that way, then he didn't really do a really good job trying to make his way to that point. It was getting kind of sudden that way. I mean, but that's the thing, and I didn't know that point. I didn't know that that was the ending that they were always meant to arrive to. So that's why I don't criticize everything that came beforehand, because I thought it did a pretty consistent job trying to keep it kind of funny and horrific, but balancing those two fairly well for the most part. So then when it did get to that heartbreaking ending, that did feel kind of sudden for me. And I guess it still kind of does, but I'm still fresh off this movie. I just saw it today, so I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it. So maybe it's not really a criticism at this point.
Yeah, trust me, it takes a couple days.
Okay, I would totally
took me a
imagine.
week to
Totally imagine.
I watched it last Sunday, and it was after we recorded.
Yeah,
I went and watched it, because I remember I asked you on that when we were done that show, like, well, should I eat before or after?
Yeah, I remember. So
Yeah,
I think the reason the ending works for me is because I feel like it plays into its themes really well. And for me, thematically, this film is talking about, I think at the root of it is it's about the lostness of humanity. You see that a lot in the Michael Parks character and some of his backstory and why he is the way he is, and even the situation he has with the walrus, in which he loves that he ends up falling in love with. At that point, it pretty much talks about how he pretty much has none, and he is willing to recreate the situation that made him gain his humanity a little bit, but it's going to be at the cost of someone else's humanity. And so the way that it plays into Justin Long's character at the end, for me, was poignant and emotional, but I think it also played into those themes really well. So for me, the construction of it was really well handled. I wish the Johnny Depp character wasn't there when they kind of break in, so to speak. Again, that was another thing that kind of took me out, because I don't feel like that character really needed to be in this film at all. I will say, to your point, Blake, if once they arrive, if it would have cut to black there, I kind of would have been okay with it, because it would have ended at this really tense moment and this really like, what the hell is going on here kind of thing.
Yeah.
I would have been okay with that now that you say it and I think about it for a second. But for me, thematically, and the way that it plays into those themes and the emotional angle of it, and when you're looking at Justin Long and what his identity has become, and like you're saying, like his hope in the middle of that and where that has gone, to me was just really heartbreaking. But I did like that and the way that it was constructed. But all right, well, any other final thoughts, and what grade would you guys give Tusk?
So I have to point out one thing that's obvious. I love the fact that Justin Long's character is named Wallace.
Yep.
Yes.
We don't have to explain why. It's obvious enough, I think. But I thought that was neat. One thing I also want to notice too, the name of Haley Joel Osment's character is Teddy, who is also the character of the teddy bear from AI Artificial Intelligence.
And another thing with that too, Wallace and Teddy are names that they came up with during this bit on their podcast.
Yeah, so I love the little parallels there. The only thing I wanted to mention too that we didn't really get much of a chance to talk about was that overall the performances in this movie are quite good. And we didn't mention Genesis Rodriguez, who plays the girlfriend, who she has one scene in this movie that actually is very convincingly believable, where she's kind of breaking
This is
down
part of my final thoughts.
Yeah,
too.
so I'm kind of stealing your thunder, I guess. But I think she has a moment there that is quite poignant, but it somehow works within the context of the film as it's trying to balance its comedy and horror fairly well, and somehow it still works and it's believable. And I was really with it. I was like, I don't even know who this actress really is, but this is actually pretty good stuff right here. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Overall, I did enjoy this movie for the most part. As I mentioned, I'm not a huge Kevin Smith fan from a filmmaking standpoint. A lot of his movies I haven't been a huge fan of. I don't think they're terrible. I have my preferences, and some of them I'm not quite as hit on as most other people are. But I did really enjoy this movie for the most part. I love the balance of the comedy and the horror aspects, at least in the first half. I do think if it was maybe like a 70 to 80 minute movie, it would have been much better, especially if they put more weight on that visual reveal and put that more towards the climax of the film. It would have been a much better film for me. I probably would be considering this as one of my favorite guilty pleasures of the year. But having said that, I give this movie a solid B. I am still fresh off of it. As I said, I just saw it today, so I probably have to think about it more before I give a concrete actual grade. But at this point, solid B, I think, is where I put it, and I overall enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, I can echo most of that there, but what I would like to remind everyone is that lest we forget, this is a film where the bad guy wins. I mean, completely and totally here. There's no real, rejoiceful, happy ending to this story at all. And what I mean by that is that, I mean, the actual end result of that last sequence there is exactly what he wanted. He sort of felt he deserved to die in a way for what has happened in the past on there. But the thing is also, this is not the first time that he's done this. There's a sequence where we see in the water, of another, bodies, and we hear the story about we're doing similar things to this in the past.
Yeah.
But
even with Deb's character, they explore that. a little bit. Yeah.
But what I'm getting at with that is with those other ones in the past, there it never really fully came to fruition as far as what the end result that he wanted to be. And in this case here, he totally beat that human being into submission as far as giving up on their humanity, becoming the beast. And letting that,
which is all he wanted.
Let it take over with that, and that's, in a way, I mean, it's kind of a sad ending at the same time here. But yeah, like you said, all the way around here, real solid performances. I liked most of all the acting in there. I liked the direction of it. Being a Kevin Smith fan, I could see all the Kevin Smithisms, throughout the process as well.
Yeah.
And a week into it, afterwards, I say it's still a B for me as well.
Yeah, I'm again very different than you guys. I guess as far as final thoughts, the one thing that I do want to touch on that you touched on, Brendan, is the flashback sequences dealing with Justin Long's character and his girlfriend and even Osment's character to a degree as well. What Kevin Smith, I think, was doing with those scenes is while there is sympathy for Justin Long's character at the beginning because these terrible things are happening to him, through these flashbacks, which are well constructed, well acted, they take away that sympathy a little bit, and they make him out to be a little bit of a despicable person. And again, all of that I think plays into the humanity themes that I've already touched on, and I think it also plays into the ending and where his identity is. That also plays into it as well. And I will say that part of it did work for me because in the end, it forces you as the viewer to look at your own humanity and still be sympathetic for him, because what this guy goes through is really horrible and really tragic. And that aspect of it is something I did appreciate, and still why I love the ending is because as the audience, you have to look at yourself a little bit as well. And to me, I thought that was really great. I think if you were going to look at this scene for scene, I think that I would love all the stuff that you guys are talking about. I just don't feel like a lot of this needs to be in here. It's for a different movie, for a different thing that's going on. That to me, I think, is what makes this film overall not work. It just felt too messy and too disjointed, because even the relationship aspects that you were referring to, Brendan, that is abandoned in the third act. These characters forget all of that stuff that happens. It doesn't really end up playing into anything except for the audience expectations, as I just referred to. But from a narrative standpoint, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't affect those characters in one way or another. And I think for me, that's ultimately why it doesn't work. Is there's a lot of great elements here, but as an overall package, a lot of it just doesn't make sense to me. So, but there is still a lot to appreciate here. But for me, this is a very disappointing C. I will say the good parts of this film, as you guys touched on, was still pretty good. I did at least enjoy those aspects of the film. I just needed a little bit more coherency, that's all. But anyway, we do have a full review of this up on our website from our writer, James Shaw. Be sure and go and check that out at InSessionFilm.com.
And of course, if you agree or disagree with our takes on Tusk, let us know by leaving us a comment on our Facebook page at facebook.com/InSessionFilm or tweet us at InSessionFilm. Leave us a comment on Google Plus or Letterboxd. Usernames on both of those sites are InSessionFilm. And of course, you can always email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com.
All right, the InSession Film Top 3 is next, and we'll be discussing our top 3 disturbing scenes. We'll give Blake some tissues, get him more happy for this segment, since it's going to be difficult. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Podcast listeners and facial hair aficionados, if you're taking a trip to the Great White North, you got to remember there are always can-a-dos and can-a-don'ts. A can-a-do is listening to the First Time Watchers podcast. They are a huge supporter of our show, and they're definitely a show you need to check out. Tim, Walter, Hermano host the show, and they definitely know their movies.
And a can-a-don't is making fun of me for liking the Transformers films. But I agree with you. Their banter is absolutely amazing. It's very entertaining. It's a really, really great show. These guys are definitely one you want to check out.
And what's unique is that every week they pick out something they've never seen before. They watch it, discuss it on the show, as well as any other movies and trailers they've seen recently.
Yeah, you definitely want to check it out. The show is very fluid. It's easy to listen to. You can tell that they have a lot of fun on the show. The guys have a really great chemistry, and they're really, really great. And they pick some really interesting topics that's definitely worth checking out. So that being said, Blake, where can you find these guys?
Well, it's not in Canada, I'll tell you that much. There are a few places that you can find them, though, outside of that. The easiest and first one is here at their website, here at firsttimewatchers.blogspot.com. On Twitter, you can find them at First Time Watchers, and on Facebook, you just search for First Time Watchers.
Yeah, definitely go subscribe to them on iTunes as well. Leave them a review. Definitely go check them out. I promise these guys are absolutely worth your time. Very, very entertaining stuff. And like you mentioned, they're such a great supporter of our show. I would love for you to go and give them a listen to. So, again, that's First Time Watchers.
Hands off the desk, sir.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 84, and now we're going to be going over our top 3 disturbing scenes, which there is a ton out there to choose from. That is unfortunately kind of so, but
yeah,
that's the way that people's mind work.
And sort of in researching this, I had to sort of just wonder about the human race in general a couple of times.
Why
I'm
would we do this?
Why? Let me just tell you. I mean, before we get in too deep in this, Western Europe is all kinds of messed up.
That is very true. Even like most of
unfortunate, yeah.
Asia too.
Yeah, it should be interesting.
Yeah.
I guess before we get into it, though, did you guys have any criteria that you looked at to pick your list?
Mine was very limited. First off, I should say I don't really get disturbed or scared very easily in movies, so I wanted to focus on any scenes that at least I came close to having to cover my eyes, or at least or even from a dramatic standpoint, not even from a visual standpoint, but even if it was dramatically like that disturbing or heartbreaking that I just couldn't bear myself to watch it. And the thing is, I kind of like dark and depressing and disturbing because normally it feels visceral. And I like
Says a lot about you, Brendan.
I
Just
love
kidding.
you. I love you too. I love you too.
I'm just kidding. Brendan's a great guy. He's a great guy.
Nice save, but Michigan still sucks.
So does Penn State.
And only this last game they did.
Go Bucks.
Okay.
Anyway, let's get back.
Anyway, the other part of my criteria is that, and I just kind of made this up right now, is right we're introducing this. I have to include a tie here. I just cannot settle on 3. I have to settle on like 4 of them. So one of them there will be.
I did that a
tie.
few weeks ago, so that's fine.
I just want to let that know up front. That sort of part of my criteria. There will be 4 films on my top 3.
All right. What about you, Blake?
Well, there's sort of a fine line, and it's not necessarily in this aspect. I'm not necessarily thinking of just like disturbing like horror type movies or things like that, or scary type things here.
Yes,
it doesn't just.
I mean, I'm talking about generally difficult to watch.
Yes.
And whether it's like you said there, whether it's a dramatic thing or it's a visual thing, there are a lot of different ways to go with that there. But
Sure.
like things that are just generally, and whether a couple of them are like, and I'll be honest with you, a couple of things on my list here, whether it's on the actual top 3 list or in honorable mentions that I mentioned later on, a few of them are like just the entire film itself, as opposed to just like one little scene.
Sure.
A couple that we'll get into there that I'm not sure if everybody's totally familiar with, but we'll get into that anyway. And yourself?
I'm very much in the same vein as you guys. I didn't really look at just like horror or physical gore, but I looked at just movies or scenes that are just incredibly arduous to watch. Kind of like what you're saying, Brendan. Just you almost have to look away. Tough to really, really get through. So that's pretty much where I stick with my criteria. All right, let's get into it. As difficult as it may be, Brendan, you're number 3.
All right, we got to break up some like happy food or happy music or something like that.
Right? Going into the next segment.
Sunday, Monday, happy days.
Give me some dancing penguins stat.
Let's watch the Penguins of Madagascar right now. So anyway, number 3 will be my tie. And I'm putting these 2 together because these are really my 2, and I'm using this term loosely, my 2 horror picks. And I'm putting quotes around that because these are arguably not really horror films, but you can lump them within the horror genre, or they have been.
Yeah.
One of them is the specific scene from my favorite horror film of all time is the crucifix scene from The Exorcist.
We've talked quite a bit about this on our show.
And as I mentioned, The Exorcist is probably one of my top 3 favorite films. And what I love most about it is what the cast and filmmaker William Friedkin had said at the time was that if you thought we were making a horror film, you've been totally mistaken.
Right.
And that's what makes the movie work so well. But that scene is just so disturbing. And JD, you can bleep me out when I say this, but when she's going, "Let Jesus you," that is just to hear a little girl say that, even for its time. That it,
I literally just got like kind of like awkward chills, like when you said that. It's just like that's not right.
not at all, not at all. But then when you actually see what she's doing, it's
very
gross.
Yeah.
Oh my god. But I still love the movie. I can still watch it anytime. But it's just that is not a pleasant scene to sit through, and that is tied at my number 3 with this next one, which is arguably a horror film, maybe not really, but it's basically the final moments of the scene Antichrist.
Yep.
Oh boy.
You guys probably know what I'm talking about, so I don't really have to go into detail about what she does to Willem Dafoe's. Takes a block of wood, destroys his, masturbates him till he ejaculates blood, then takes the scissors to her own. And I'm done.
That's a lot of words I gotta bleep out now. That's very
that's
tough.
That's all I have to say. But man, Lars von Trier made a movie that it's a movie I have to say is a good movie because it affects me and it works on what it's trying to do. But I will never be able to sit through that again.
Well, we're talking about a movie where he came directly from a rehab facility
out of
for
depression,
deep
too.
depression,
Yeah, exactly,
and like could not function as a human being and make that movie for the first couple of
Very
weeks.
much reflects his state of mind.
Exactly.
Big time,
And that's part of his like depression trilogy.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
That was higher. That was actually higher on my list, honestly.
Oh God!
But it was obviously there. So
I think it's.
And going back to your Exorcist scene is one I really consider for this list too. Really, really solid. Good honorable mention for me.
Yeah, good deal.
All right, Blake, what do you got at number 3?
Okay. Well, I will say that was on my list here, and I've got a lot to pick from, so I'll kind of alter mine as I go along with my list here. But I will say that's definitely up there for me. But I will say let's go with a tie with that one. And my number 3 on my list that was going to be my number 3 is from I forget what year it was. I know it was in the 70s, but the film Cannibal Holocaust. Which we're talking about a movie that was meant to be, and they actually had the actors like hide out and not be in public. They didn't have jobs, whatever, for so long to make it believe.
Right.
People believe it was like the first found footage film, basically, that the people were going to document this cannibal tribe somewhere in Africa or whatever. And yeah, I get all that. That's all fine and wonderful. But what I'm talking about is the scene when they quite literally and for real kill a giant turtle. There's a giant, it's not a sea turtle, but it's a giant turtle here that they literally murder, chop up in order, it's to eat. It's for them to actually have food to survive, but it's absolutely real. This is in the 70s. There's none of those. No animals were harmed during this process.
It's not true. That's a real. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's not. It is an actual, real, live giant turtle, and to see them like literally with machetes, breaking the shell of this thing apart and ripping it apart and cutting it up and everything like that.
Wow.
It's just to think about that for a second. Like, we've got a lot of great Hollywood effect things out there these days, but when you see something like that's like actually happening. And whether it's an animal or whatever, makeup effects can only go so far. But they literally like dissected. I mean, not dissected, but like brutally killed and ate this giant turtle, like out in the field somewhere in Africa. Yeah, all kinds of messed up and hard to watch.
Could you imagine if they try to do that nowadays? How much trouble they
it would never happen. That would not happen.
Yeah, oh my god.
And it's not that the thing is it's
crazy.
It's not for me being like a a PETA or whatever, something like that. I mean, I'm certainly protect all the animals out there, at least the cute ones, which is what they believe. They can give a crap less about cows and pigs and what have you, but still, it's just the simple idea of like, wow, that really just happened, and it's on film and it's in a real movie that was like released. Like that's.
Ooh,
yeah.
Dang.
That's good stuff. No, it means bad stuff.
It's terrible.
Well, for my number 3, I'm going with a film that I've actually never seen, at least all the way through. This was actually brought to my attention today, so my afternoon has been really, really crazy. But I threw out the question on Twitter, and we'll get to this here in a second, as to suggestions for this list.
And I think I know where you're going. I think I know what film you're picking.
Okay, so the first time watchers, guys, I think threw this out to me first, and then DJ Valentine also got into the mix in this, and they were like, you got to see this. It's really, really crazy. And it was really funny because DJ's like, there's no turning back. Like, if you go and watch this, it's the end.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, well, I got to at least check this out. So even though I haven't seen the entire film, I did watch about 15, 20 minutes of it. And I had to see a specific scene that they threw out as far as the suggestion for this.
I feel like I know where you're going.
I immediately regretted it.
And if I'm right, like I don't know where this is going to go. This is your number 3.
Yeah, well, and the reason it's my number 3 is because I haven't really seen the entire film, so I can't really speak on it that much. But this scene is pretty bad. And it is the film, a Serbian film.
Yep.
And it's the baby scene. I'll just say that.
Yep.
And it is one of the grossest things I've ever seen in my entire life. And I will say, I don't know the actor in the scene, but his reaction to it was pretty much my reaction to it. Because he's basically like, I can't believe I'm watching this.
Okay,
why would anyone make this? And he just walks out.
Yeah.
Which would be exactly. That would be everyone's reaction, right? But it is incredibly tough to get through. In fact, in my notes, I wrote down a quote from DJ who tweeted me this earlier today. And he said, I've never felt worse to be a film lover until I saw that scene, until after I saw that scene.
Absolutely right.
I completely agree with that now. After seeing it.
So true.
It is so disturbing and just, it's awful. And what's even more terrible about this scene is as this guy is doing stuff to this newborn baby, I'll just say, the mother's reaction to it is just as horrible as she has this like, real the small grin, smile on her face, like she's enjoying it, made me want to vomit. It's one of the worst things. And so after seeing this, I went and read a bunch of internet comments about it and saw some other tweets, and just based off of that and just how people are just so offended by this and on so many levels. And so even though I haven't really seen the film in its entirety, I think based on what I've seen this afternoon, it deserves a spot in my top 3. So
I'm jealous of you because you have not actually laid your eyes on it. This is in some of the research that I did that I went through. Like, I felt like a terrible human being after almost even knowing that this exists.
I know.
Like, who would put this on film? Whether it's actually a movie made about this kind of stuff, but the premises and the ideas that they portray on there. There's a whole lot that goes on in that film here that are just it's a straight spiral down.
I've heard the entire movie is just it's awful.
It's one after the other. Ridiculous things.
So in fact, one of my favorite comments that I read, I can't remember where I read it, but some guy said, "I dare you to watch the whole thing."
Mm-hmm.
That was his words verbatim.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know if I'm up to that dare after watching just 15 minutes of it.
Yeah. Well, I sped through a lot of it. I couldn't make myself sit there for like an hour and a half and do all that there, but a majority of it I got the idea anyway.
It's like something that should be on a show like Fear Factor or something like that.
No.
Look, watch the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
And you go on to the next round.
Not the actual the watching of the film.
Watching of the film.
Sorry, I was just
watching of the film.
I did not feel well after watching it.
I don't blame you for sure.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to say that thank God I've never seen it, and I think I'm never gonna touch that piece of crap.
Yeah.
It's
unbelievable. All right, Brendan, what do you got at number 2?
My number 2 is let's wonder if this is a movie you guys have ever seen or at least even heard of, but it's one of the very first major roles of Ellen Page. The movie's called Hard Candy.
Yes.
And
this is a good one. This is a good one.
And specifically, it's the pre-castration scene where she is basically the story here. For those who may not have heard of it, is it's basically Patrick Wilson and Ellen Page, and they're exchanging like contacts and emails back and forth, basically about despicable older human beings, older men specifically, that try and get in contact with younger women, younger girls, and they kind of do really sexual things, essentially. I mean, but it's disgusting because it happens in real life all the time. But this is a neat movie where she turns the tables on him, drugs him, and takes him captive in his own house, by the way. And there's a scene where she is basically going to perform an operation on his penis and basically... But it's this long 20-minute sequence of them talking, her icing him down. You hear some of the little noises with the scalpel and everything like that, and it is the most. I was sitting here like this in a curled ball watching that scene.
Oh, I can imagine.
Oh my God! When's this gonna end? When's this gonna freaking end? And I mean, it ends.
You're crossing your legs the whole time.
It's
for sure.
It's so uncomfortable, and it's so horrific, and mainly because the performances by both Patrick Wilson and Ellen Page here. I mean, I think are more than Oscar worthy. I think are fantastic.
Really
It's just the kind of film that the Academy would never look to, but it is fantastic stuff, and it's such a depressing movie. And oh my God, that's so uncomfortable though.
Yeah, I'm very uncomfortable right now because both of your picks so far have had to do with penis mutilation.
I know what's going on.
There's a recurring theme going on here.
I'm a creepy dude.
That I'm obviously not comfortable with.
Hopefully, that's the last time we see it come up on my list, though.
I would agree. I hope.
All right, Blake, what do you got at number 2, man?
Oh man, there's still, of course, he mentioned Antichrist first, and then of course you went with the Serbian film. There is a film released in 1977, an Italian film called Salò, or the 120 Days of Sodom.
Waiting for this one to come up from someone.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is another one I wasn't familiar with until this afternoon.
Yeah, me too.
I've known it for a while. Yeah.
So, and I've known of it for a while, but never really had watched a lot of it here. There's a lot of stuff that goes on throughout the whole film here. I mean, it's basically the idea, and I'll read you the exact premise here from IMDb, and it just says, 4 fascist libertines round up 9 adolescent boys and girls and subject them to 120 days of physical, mental, and sexual torture. And that's all it is. It's these rich aristocrats or whatever that, like, they're dressed up in like tuxedos and making events out of this stuff the entire time here, and just
sounds awful.
Just loving it up. And there's terrible scenes of, we're talking about them, raping children, basically, a lot of stuff. And as bad as that is, there's a sequence at a dinner
Yep.
Where they quite literally make them eat freshly acquired feces.
Oh God!
And see them like the faces that they make when they're doing this, and it's just. And it looks pretty legit at that time. We're talking about the 70s, and I know that obviously that wouldn't happen there. We're talking about people at this point here,
right.
But again, these Europeans are crazy. They're like literally putting together films like this, but literally. There's a line when there's one of the boys that's doing it, and he's like chewing, and the old man across from him says something like, he says, "Make this face," and he makes him make a face, whatever, and say you can't eat rice like this, and then he says, well then eat. And that's what they're doing. And it's they're making them literally these kids, and I'm talking like 13, 14-year-olds probably sit there and do that. And it's,
that's terrible.
I winced quite a bit.
Again, it's one I've seen that scene though, mainly out of curiosity, but I've never seen the whole movie, and probably for good reason, for the same reason of a Serbian film.
Right.
And that's why you won't see those on my list, because I just haven't seen the whole movie. But those scenes are just, what the...
Why would somebody do that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. Very, very interesting. For my number 2, it is a little bit of a graphic scene, but it's not necessarily difficult on the ways we've been talking about with some of these last films. But for my number 2, it's a very polarizing film for a lot of people, but my number 2 is the beating and the execution and the Passion of the Christ. Mm-hmm. And this is, it's not just that it's graphic in nature, it is that, but for me and why it makes number 2 on my list, it's that the graphic nature of this and just the violence and the arduous nature of it is pivotal to the story and its themes. Mm-hmm. And despite what you believe, I don't think that is necessarily relevant here. But I think for this specific story and what it's trying to do, the gruesomeness of it is a huge factor into the character, and it is really well staged. It's really well put together, and for me was very difficult to sit through. Especially there's one moment where Jim Caviezel is on his knees, and he's the actor that plays Jesus here.
Yes.
And the whip comes from one side of his body, and it grabs him on his ribs, and rips the flesh right out of it. And when I see it now, I can't watch it. Like, I know it's coming, and I turn my head every time. Like, I don't even want to see it. It is just awful. And when Caviezel is in that moment, he sells it really, really well. And you can see the pain on his face, and you feel it with him. And again, despite what you believe, I don't think that's relevant here. You know that what this character is going through is torture, and it's awful. But for me, I think the reason he's going through it, as difficult as it is, it plays into those themes really well, and something that I like, because the film is ultimately about hope, and that aspect of it, I think, is really intriguing to me, again, despite whatever you believe. So I really bought it. I thought it was really well done. People can say what they want about Mel Gibson, but that is difficult to watch. It's really gruesome, and it's really well done, in my opinion.
So I will say this, that is an honorable mention for me. And the main reason is because it's something that is difficult it is to watch. It is something I couldn't look away from, though. And I had to embrace what I was seeing. I still remember I went to go see this when it first came out. I guess it was 2004. So I think I'm a baby here. I don't even think I was allowed to get into an R-rated film by myself at that time. Right. And at that moment, this was the highest grossing R-rated film ever, which I don't know if it still holds that title today or not.
I'm not sure.
But the parking lot was full to the point that there were cars parked in other lots, and they had to walk like a mile to get to the theater. Yeah. When that scene you're talking about, the 39 lashes, but when it gets to that scene with the rib cage and it pulls his flesh off, I broke down in tears when I saw that. Like, I literally did. I lost it, and I believe in this story. You know, it doesn't matter what you believe in or not. Like, I mean, that's beside the point. You can choose what you want to do, but I personally believe in this story, and so it hit me really hard seeing that. And
it's tough.
It's a really close honorable mention for me, but that's a great pick, though. I mean, just for that reason.
And I think another thing that adds to it is, one, when you put yourself in that position, it's hard to believe anyway.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a pretty well-known story now that when they were shooting this, there was one moment Caviezel talks about where it actually hit him.
Yeah.
Like he was actually hit by it, and he said it was the worst pain he's ever felt in his life.
Oh, God, yeah.
And I couldn't even imagine that actually happening 38 other times.
Yes.
Like, right. That would just be the worst. So, I mean, what this guy goes through is just incredibly arduous, and especially like you're saying, if you do believe in it, like you do, Brendan, it's definitely going to hit a certain part of you. And I think Gibson again does that really, really well. And there's some other great scenes too that play into kind of the graphicness of it too. That's just really well staged, really well done. So, and in my opinion, it's a great film. But
I agree.
Yeah. On a side note, one of my favorite scores too of the 2000s.
Oh, so, I completely agree. It's a beautiful score. Yeah.
All right, Brennan, what about your number one?
So my number one may seem like maybe an obvious pick. It's probably one that came up a lot. At least if you look at any list of the most disturbing movies or movie scenes, you'll see this one come up a lot. And this is not a specific scene I'm referencing. This is basically the final 30 minutes of the film, and that's the final 30 minutes of Requiem for a Dream.
Yep.
Our next winner is that delightful personality. Straight from Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, please give a juicy welcome to Mrs. Sarah Goldfarb! I'm delighted to tell you that you have just won the grand prize! Now let me tell you what you've won. Your prize is a sweet smile on his own private business. He just got engaged and is about to get married this summer. Will you please give a warm and juicy welcome, Harry Goldfarb! Juice my Harry, juice my Harry, juice my Harry. Ooh, Harry got juice, Harry got juice. Ooh, I love you, Harry. I love you too, Mom.
It's a movie that I watched it for the first time when I was like maybe 19 years old, and I made a vow saying, this movie's amazing. I love it. I'm never going to watch it again. I will never forget anything
I'm absolutely
I saw.
with you. Yeah.
And then I decided like only a few months ago, because it was on Netflix, I watched it a second time because maybe there's some things I forgot. Nope, I still remember that whole damn thing.
Yep.
And I regret sitting through it again. But those final 30 minutes, what these characters are going through, from a filmmaking standpoint, it's kind of similar to what Terry Gilliam does in Fear and Loathing, just from a non-comical standpoint. Creates this paranoia for the audience specifically. And at the same time, your heart breaks for all these characters. The big one especially, the one that's hardest for me to watch, is with the Ellen Burstyn character. When she is going through shock therapy, that is just I always break down in tears every time I see that. And then there's the moment where Jared Leto's arm basically gets cut off, and that editing there is just pitch perfect. But wow, I have no words to describe it. Hard to watch, but poignant and at the same time. But I'll never want to sit through that again.
From a technical standpoint, we were just talking about how I love the score from Passion of the Christ. Clint Mansell's score in that movie is pivotal, I think, for
it's a character in the film.
It is. It absolutely. It's my absolute favorite score of all time.
It's amazing.
But the thing with it is though, I've seen it kind of copied and reused and kind of sampled in a lot of other things. It was in like trailers for Lord of the Rings. And
it's been in a lot of trailers.
I've seen it like for NBA playoffs and crap like that. But I hear it and I recognize those chords. And I'm like, suddenly sad inside.
Because you just know what it was used for.
I know where it came from. And it's like that.
And I can understand why they want to use it musically. It's just really great.
I agree.
Oh, yeah.
For those that have seen the film, though, it definitely takes you there.
And,
for sure.
it's really hard to pick a character there towards in that movie that you feel the worst for. But, I mean, I definitely agree as far as Ellen Burstyn's character in that and with what she goes through. But to me, what is worse to me is Jennifer Connelly because the reason why I say this is because she's the one actually has a smile on her face at the end of the movie. Like I think she's got it worse because she's still gonna keep doing the same thing over and over, and she's killing herself by doing that. But she's laying there. I mean, sure, she's curled up in the fetal position or whatever, but she's holding her wad of money with a big smile on her face.
That's the most depressing. That is very depressing. That's a good point because out of the four major characters, she's the one that hasn't had the realization of what they were doing was essentially wrong. I guess you can say she's the one that's. You're right. This is the start of her downfall. Yeah. She hasn't hit that peak yet.
Thinks that what she's doing is perfectly fine.
Yeah, I agree with you guys for sure. All right, Blake, what do you got at number one, man?
Okay, my number one is from a 2002 film. I think it was French by origin, called Irreversible.
Yeah.
Tu veux que je te lise? Le temps détruit tout. Je viens de penser à ça, tiens.
Qu'est-ce qui t'est arrivé?
Ouf. Oh, je vais te le dire. Je fais de la tôle parce que... j'ai couché avec ma fille.
Ah, le syndrome occidental.
There are a couple of scenes in this movie that are really, really difficult to watch. I mean, there's a scene in which somebody's brutally murdered with a fire extinguisher. Then it gets pretty graphic. But if you look at some of the trivia for this movie here, before I really get to the main point, it's a movie that's kind of meant to be kind of revolting in a way. And I was reading through some of this stuff here, and I'm going to read this directly from IMDb, so I'm not mistaking this here, but it's really interesting. The first 30 minutes of this film has a background noise at the frequency of 28 hertz. It's a low frequency, almost inaudible, and it's similar to the noise produced by earthquakes. In humans, it causes nausea, sickness, and vertigo, and it was designed to do this. They did it on purpose in order to get people to like be revolted and walk out of the theater. 3 people.
That was their goal.
That was their goal. 3 people passed out during this film's release in Cannes that year. But the difficult thing that I'm talking about here, and they did like 20 takes of this, but there is a 12 to 13 minute straight on solid one take scene when Monica Bellucci is brutally raped and beaten. And it's like I have to feel like that if I were to ever somehow witness this, that's what it would look like, what it would sound like, what it would the feeling that I would have. Of course, I never, ever, 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 ever want to be anywhere around anything like that. That's the most disgusting thing ever. But the first take they did like 20 times, and she said that the first take was the easiest because they just kind of got into it, and then they kept doing it over and over and over, and it was just more and more difficult as it went on here.
Oh, I can imagine.
But it's just I mean, the film itself takes place in reverse chronological order from the end of the night backwards. But that sequence there, I mean, it's just I didn't even want to have my hands over my eyes and kind of peek through my fingers at some points. You don't even want to do that. It's just. You felt like I kind of felt like a worse person after seeing it.
So ashamed of the fact that I just sat through this. I'm a terrible human being for doing that.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I really did. I mean, I just did not feel well after that.
Yeah, especially it's one of those things where it's just 13 minutes of it, and it goes on for such a long time, and it's so visceral that it's very tough to get through.
It just feels too real.
Yeah, sure. A lot of responses on Twitter for that one as well. Good picks, guys, for your number one. For my number one, I'm going with a film that Brendan already ruined as far as the reveal of it. But my number one is Lars von Trier's Antichrist.
I'm at the bridge. It's evening. Almost no birds can be heard. The water is running without a sound. Darkness comes early down here. I walk into it. The little deers are hiding among the ferns, as usual.
Is it difficult to walk there?
No, not really. In fact, it's almost okay.
And for a lot of the reasons, I guess we already talked about, I don't really need to go into it a ton further, I guess. But
you don't have to bleep it out again.
Yeah, I don't have to bleep it out again. But it does go to show just how depression can be a huge influence on people, and not just with what these characters do, but as we talked about, you see the reflection in Von Trier's personal state through a lot of this film, and it is really tough to watch, and it's very unrelenting in a lot of ways, and very much like you, Brendan, I can never watch this film again. The film itself is very difficult, but this last sequence and what they do to each other is so brutal. and it's so difficult. And I can't get through it. Even that first time watching it, I didn't watch it when it first came out.
Yeah.
I had already heard the reports, already heard the rumors of what had happened, so I was already kind of anticipating it a little bit. And it was still hard for me to sit there and get through. In fact, I probably paused it at one point and was like, I don't know if I can continue. And I eventually got through to the end, but it is one of those things that's just so arduous, and it's a film that I cannot recommend at all.
It's strange though, because as much of it the same boat that I am into. I actually own this movie. I blind bought it before I ever watched it because it's part of my Criterion collection, I guess. And I always wanted to see it, but really, it's that scene particularly that we keep talking about that really makes this movie so hard to sit through. But aside from that, I have to comment some of the good qualities of this movie. It's one of the most beautifully shot films I've ever seen. It's
gorgeously shot.
I mean, just from that alone, I could rewatch those scenes before what happens to what we're talking about, because it's so beautiful to look at, though, and it's so well acted too. But I mean, it's definitely a hard film to sit through just because it's so sad and what this couple's going through with the loss of their infant child. But wow, it's building to something big, and it goes for it.
And even though as sad as it is, some of that exploration is still intriguing, because what these characters go through would be difficult for any parent, for sure. I mean, and I've seen other films like this as of recent, although very, very different. Thematically, it's kind of the same, but the Belgium film last year, Broken Circle Breakdown, is kind of similar in terms of these two characters who are losing their kid. In this instance, they were losing her to cancer.
Right.
But the film is centered around these two parents and their reactions to this terrible thing happening around them. And I think that film is very well made, too. I think I like that one better than this one, but some of that stuff as you're talking about is pretty intriguing, and the exploration there is well done. I do have some issues with it. I just feel like for me it's just too unrelenting. It was too much for me to fully enjoy, even from a technical film standpoint. But I certainly don't hate the film.
Oh yeah,
it's just one of those. It's well made. Can never watch it again. Despite even the last sequences.
Yeah. Right. It was on my, for some reason, because again I kind of watch a lot of like generic bad horror films and stuff on Netflix and what have you, and it was on like one of my suggested things. Are showing up for a long time there, and I never ever watched it until really recently, and I had never really thought about it. I mean, the film is called Antichrist, so I'm wondering if I've got a whole different idea of this film before I go into it, honestly.
Yeah.
But I get the idea of it. It's not necessarily talking about the spawn of Satan, but the realism, or there's a couple of different ideas behind that or whatever. But the title aside from it, just beautifully shot, kind of drawn out there. I don't feel like Willem Dafoe's character as much. You don't feel the sorrow from him or the depression from him. But just what a ride.
Yeah,
that's all we have to say about that.
That's pretty much the only thing.
In the words of Forrest Gump, that's all I have to say about that.
Right.
All right. Well, any honorable mentions?
Well, I already mentioned the 39 Lashes from The Passion of the Christ is a big honorable mention for me. But I have two big honorable mentions here that I didn't really want to talk about on my top three, because it kind of would have gotten into spoiler territory, and they're movies I think that a lot of people may not have seen. I'll talk about it briefly here, and they really kind of deal with something bad that happens to children. We talked about Salo kind of being one of those examples, but these two, one of them is Michael Haneke's Funny Games.
Yep.
And the scene I'm talking about,
the original.
Well, both of them really. I mean, but the original.
I haven't seen the newer version here, but I've heard a little bit of differences.
There's some minor differences. Essentially, it's shot for shot the same.
Okay.
But I do agree that the German film, I guess it's German, is the better version. But the scene I'm talking about specifically is when there's a gunshot that goes off camera.
Yeah. And
because they're playing some kind of game where they're counting off who's going to get shot, and you find out it's basically what gets shot, and there's blood all over the TV, and and I'm sitting here with my jaw dropped, saying, they just killed that.
Yeah.
And it's so depressing. And so so we kind of got into a spoiler there. I wanted to avoid that, but we talked about it anyway. The other one was I guess
what you don't know is I'm gonna end up bleeping that entire sentence.
Darn. Anyway, the other honorable mention I have is a film called The Orphanage. which is a Spanish horror
Yeah,
film.
I think you talked about this a few weeks
It's
ago.
one of
I
the
believe.
there's a heartbreak. I don't know if guys have ever seen it.
I don't think I have.
But there's it's basically a kind of like a ghost story about this woman who goes back to her old orphanage home that she used to live at. I guess they're trying to reopen it and things like that, and kind of becomes a bit of a ghost story. Her son goes missing, kind of revolves around the mystery of what happened to her son. The reveal of what happens to her son is one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever seen in any movie, period. And I burst out into tears every time I watch it. Then it builds to this almost like Spielberg-esque ending. It's kind of hopeful at the same time, but it strangely works. But it's so heartbreaking what happens here. I don't want to say what happens for those who haven't seen the movie, but like it really kind of just drives home the sense that, I mean, I mentioned cruelty to children is something that kind of hits me hard for some reason.
Sure.
And this one just, it goes for that. And it really doesn't use that as a crutch or anything like that. It creates a really heartbreaking ending, and it is something else. But it has a hopeful resolution at the afterward too. So it's not completely depressing, but it's a fantastic movie. It was one of my favorite movies of the decade. I urge people to go check it out if you haven't seen it.
All right, what about you, Blake?
I've got a few here. Some of these are more of the actual just sequences rather than the entire films, like I was kind of getting at earlier there. One of which I think many people should think about here is in Trainspotting.
Yeah,
Not the baby crawling on the ceiling, but when they wake up to find their baby dead.
Yes.
That's like, wow. I mean,
the neglect for it,
that or just sheer neglect of drug use and what have you. And that's just that's heartbreaking and terrible there. A couple other ones that I mentioned on here. The film, well, you mentioned The Exorcist earlier, another William Friedkin film, Bug.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
The scene where Michael Shannon pulls his teeth out.
Yep.
That I like. I mean, he's got the pliers on his mouth and he's just rinsing back and forth and like flailing around the room, and there's blood all over the walls everywhere. And it's I mean, I have had to, not like a whole tooth or like that. I've had like a broken tooth and had like a little sliver there that I had to like rip off because it wouldn't go nowhere. And that was like the worst feeling ever. There's nothing worse than that. And then so to watch that happen was just uncomfortable completely.
That's an underrated freaking film.
I
love that movie.
I agree.
Overall, yeah.
Not a lot of people, I guess. I mean, I wasn't as familiar with this one here, but we all are familiar with Steve McQueen's long trekking shots. The movie Hunger.
Yep.
The sequence when they pull all of them out of their cells and force them down the gauntlet of all the guards with their riot gear and everything, and then search them and everything. That was just. I mean, and again, that's something that really happened. That's a true story. That's based, on the IRA hunger strikes and everything. It was terrible.
Yeah.
The other one that really, really bothers me is in the American version of The Ring, in the actual haunted video or whatever. There's one little quick thing where you see a finger like pushing down on a nail, and it goes like through the end of the finger, and you see like the actual fingernail like pry up or whatever, and it goes through there.
God.
Yeah, that's just awkward to see as well. It's not good. So that was, just certainly not a top thing, but the honorable mention, just seeing that happen, like, am I watching like a horror movie, or is this like a 9 Inch Nails video, or
literally a 9 Inch Nails?
Well, yeah, quite literally. I mean, I really didn't mean to make a pun there, but this time,
not this time.
But that's just really, really bad as well.
I forgot about that scene, so thanks for bringing it back up.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Well, as far as my honorable mentions, I have a few that you guys had already mentioned. The crucifix scene in The Exorcist, the rape scene in Irreversible I had thrown on there as well, and also the dead baby scene in Trainspotting. Was definitely an honorable mention for me as well. A few more that you guys hadn't mentioned. I also threw on the curb stomp from American History X.
Yeah.
I also had the pawn shop scene from Pulp Fiction is one that I looked at as well. And I think there's a few from like these kind of torture horror films. I think there's quite a few you could look at. For me, the one that just makes me lose it every time is the clipping of the Achilles of the guy in the first Hostel movie.
Yes.
There's a few in that one you could really pick from. For me personally, that's the one that really gets me.
I think because you hear it, it's visceral. You know, it's the actual snipping is done off camera, which is very rare for a torture porn film because they like to show everything.
Yeah, but it's. I think they do that because the guy is like, "All right, you can leave now," and then he gets up to go, and then you see it.
Yeah,
and it's like, oh,
and you
God.
know it's coming. And it's
just terrible. Another one I had. I don't know if you guys have seen this movie, but there is a scene in the movie Splice where Adrian Brody has sex with this creature that was so disturbing and weird. I almost didn't even finish the film because of this, and it's sort of like an incest monster creature scene. It's really strange, very bizarre, but that was one I considered as well. And the last one I'll just throw out there, and this is not necessarily more horror or graphic or anything like that. This is just more disturbing from a psychological standpoint, and it's the movie Compliance, which I think is a very underrated film. It's really, really well made, but what they force this girl to do is extremely disturbing. And even what's more disturbing, not even just the act itself, but that the people surrounding this story, that they let it happen. And that'll make more sense. That probably sounds weird out of context, but when you watch the film, it makes a lot more sense because the people that forced her to do this aren't really the people that are forcing her to do it. But it'll make sense when you watch the film. But that in itself is just crazy. Very, very disturbing stuff. But
good stuff.
Anyway, that is all I had on my honorable mentions.
All right. Well, let us know how your picks stack up against ours. Email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com or leave a comment on Facebook or Twitter or on our website at InSessionFilm.com.
Well, on the topic of our top three, JD, you mentioned that you threw out the question on Twitter to some of our listeners what some of their most disturbing scenes were, and we got some really great responses back.
We got a lot of responses.
Yeah,
it was great.
And all kind of sudden, too. I think you just posed a question not too long ago.
It was this afternoon,
So thank you for our loyal viewers out there.
Really appreciate it,
But anyway, we're just going through some of them right now, see how them kind of lined up. So first off, Basement Balcony said, to this day, the rape scene in Irreversible was one of the most disturbing scenes I've ever watched, and that's a very good choice. We talked about our list. Yep. No need to go more into it because that's too depressing. The First Time Watchers group mentioned a Serbian film and a few scenes from Antichrist, but also talked out the Human Centipede 2 as very disturbing.
We didn't really touch on those two films a ton, but those movies are messed up.
They really are. But I mean, they're specifically talking about Human Centipede 2 in this one. I haven't seen that one. I've seen the first one, though.
Well, what's interesting about that one is it starts off with the guy watching the movie Human Centipede and then tries to replicate it.
That is kind of interesting. Now I want to get grossed out by just watching that thing. That sounds like a good pick. Then they also went and tossed out Sallow, which we
talked about.
We don't need to talk about that again. All right, so
but that was the tweet though that got me. Maybe interested is not the right word. It sparked.
It made you want to see what the heck what you were missing.
That conversation went further, and they were talking about how crazy it is, whatever. And then I did the research, and then that's why I ended up going with a Serbian film. But it was First Time Watchers that kind of brought up that. It was that tweet that brought it up to me.
No, that's a good one then too. Yeah. And then Movie Madness Pod talks two movies that also were honorable mentions for me that I failed to mention.
I know, same here.
Or the hobbling scene in Misery.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
Which is terribly disturbing to watch.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you've ever read the novel.
I haven't, no.
It's worse than the novel.
I can imagine.
It's actually different, and I don't know if I should. I'll refrain from spoiling.
We'll talk about it later.
But then they also mentioned the ending of The Mist,
which is such a good one.
So depressing,
so heartbreaking. That would be more like top 3 heartbreaking scenes for me than it would be disturbing. But I can see where he's coming from.
I can too. Yeah. So I'm kind of in the same boat there. But that really is a heartbreaking moment.
Yeah.
Three Cuckoos mentioned that they just saw Under the Skin the other night, and the scene where they leave the baby on the beach. Now, I have not seen this movie yet, so I don't know if this spoils anything.
That's not a spoiler, but what it does, and we kind of talked about this with them on Twitter a little bit further, but it does play thematically into the character very, very well. And it's not a huge spoiler, but what he's talking about there is a great moment for this top 3. It is very disturbing, very heartbreaking, and it is a solid choice for sure.
Yeah, so I've always been curious to see this movie. I just haven't had the chance to watch it yet, and I knew you weren't a huge fan of it. I mean, you didn't hate it, I guess, but
yeah, I definitely have some issues with it. I think it's a bit too pretentious at times.
Okay, well then maybe I might like it then.
Probably. So,
continuing on, the guys at the True Bromance Crew talked about Casey Affleck seeing the underwear in the sink and Gone Baby Gone. That scene effed me up. That is a great scene, though. It really is.
Yeah,
I
agree.
I haven't seen that movie in a long time, but that scene I won't ever forget.
Yeah,
from it. That is
I agree.
That's a great mystery film.
Yeah.
I got to watch that again. That was a good movie. Life First Film talks about the bit with the girl's eye at the end of Hostel. That's a pretty gross one.
Yes.
Yeah. And also the bit with the key in the eye in Saw 2. Generally eye-related stuff, apparently.
Yeah. And I also threw one back to him on Twitter when the guy, the football player, loses his eye in Any Given Sunday.
Ooh, yeah.
And he's like, yeah, you could add that to the film. I'll never watch it again.
Yeah, man. And on a side note there, too, I haven't seen all the Saw films. I think I've seen the first 3 or 4. But Saw 2 is the only one I actually did really like.
Yeah, sure.
So I give him.
I
credit.
like the first one.
I like the first one too. I didn't like the ending though. I didn't like the very
the ending.
It amounted
made the movie.
It amounted to nothing for me. So it's like, oh, let's just shock people because they wouldn't expect it. That was how I felt about it. But that's
I disagree. But
that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
Lastly, we've got Mr. DJ Valentine trying to be a DJV, talking about Irreversible again. The alley. The gay club murder. So some specific scenes from Irreversible there. Some really, let's not talk more about that. And also going back into Antichrist, both the mutational
the ending.
Sequence. That's all we have to say about that. But that's some good stuff there. I mean, there's a lot of depressing movies out there. We saw some nice crossovers. So
yeah, and we had a lot of other tweets. We just don't have time to mention all of the ones that we got, but really seriously appreciate everyone that got back to us.
We really do.
And
also think of it this way, we're trying to refrain from how many we say because it would just make us too depressing.
That too. Plays into that as well. Anyway.
Yeah.
But we do appreciate everyone. All right, before we move on, let's talk about this week's poll.
It's real bad, okay? I don't like those numbers at all.
Just one poll? Those things aren't scientific.
Yes, they are. All this is science. This is math.
All right, for our poll question this week, since The Equalizer did come out in wide release in theaters, we obviously didn't talk about it on this week's show, but I figured for the poll, we would center around Denzel Washington. And so I said, if you could only watch one Denzel movie for the rest of time, which would you choose? And it pretty much just gave in a write-in option so people could write in whenever they want. And we had a bunch of options on social media as well as on the website. As far as the website goes, though, Man on Fire took away this, not just on our website, but also on social media. Training Day was right there in second place, and in third place was Crimson Tide. We also had a few for American Gangster, a few for Malcolm X, even a few for Book of Eli and John Q as well. I'll toss it to you guys also. Which Denzel movie would you guys choose?
You know, when you first asked me this, I said, "Remember the Titans," and just because
how could you not? I'm like, how did that not end up on the list?
I'm very surprised by that.
Me too.
And I think that is it's just every time it's on TV, I could sit through the whole thing.
I guess that's when people think Denzel, they automatically go to Man on Fire or these other ones.
Some of the more action.
I just feel like it's a
films,
forgotten Denzel film.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point, but I do think that you really can't ignore the greatness of Remember the Titans.
I
and
agree.
His performance in that.
fully
I think
agree.
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
That would have been my pick.
What about you?
Yeah,
Blake?
either that or that. Honestly, I mean, there's a lot of good options on there. Don't get me wrong. I love Denzel, but that's obviously where I would go.
Which is quite interesting because I know when we discussed this on the extra film, Brendan, for me it was Remember the Titans too.
Yeah.
It's my personal favorite football movie of all time.
It's one of mine.
I really, really love this film quite a bit. And although we didn't get that on the website, we also didn't get any tweets for that as well. It was like everyone loved Man on Fire, Training Day, Crimson Tide. That was a lot of responses. And I get it for a lot of good reasons. I was just quite surprised, though, that nobody, us at least,
did we not even get
Titans.
any for Inside Man?
No, not that I remember.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
None on the website.
Nothing
anyway.
for Flight either. Oh, that's interesting.
Nobody Remember the Titans.
That's very ironic.
Everybody forgot the Titans.
Ironic. Everybody forgot the Titans.
Yeah.
How
Tip
right.
your waitress will be here all week. Try the veal.
Anyway, that is all we have for the poll this week.
All right. Well, coming up next, we're going to delve into a new segment called Trailer Talk. I've been trying to get JD to actually get more into upcoming things forever. He's been hating movie trailers. I've convinced him otherwise. So we're all going to talk about a few new trailers that have come out in the past week here and discuss our excitement for these films that are coming out here in the next few months. So hang around. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, just want to pause for a second to say a quick thank you to those that are supporting the show. If you want to help support us, there's a couple of different ways that you can help us out. One, you can go check out our brand new InSession Film store. So if you want to get a t-shirt or a mug or a tie or something with the InSession Film logo on it, you can do that. If you just go to InSessionFilm.com/store, you'll be able to see some of the cool stuff we already got up there. We'll be adding to it as time goes on. If you have a suggestion for something that you'd like with our logo on it, just let us know. We can definitely add that to the store. But that's a really fun way that you can definitely help us out, and we really, really appreciate it. Another thing that you can do is go listen to our bonus content for just a small donation of 99 cents. They are free to listen to, but we do encourage and appreciate that small donation. And you can do that by clicking the bonus content tab on our main menu at our site at InSessionFilm.com. And lastly, if you like reading books, but maybe you don't have the time, Audible.com is the way to go. That's definitely what I do. And as mentioned up at the top of the show, we're sponsored by AudibleTrial.com. If you just go to audibletrial.com/InSessionFilm, you'll get a free audiobook and a free 30-day trial just for signing up. And that also helps support our show. And it's a great way to listen to some awesome audiobooks. So either way we go, we really, really appreciate everyone's support.
Hi, this is Greg.
This is Chuck.
And this is Dan. And we are Talking in Circles.
Because the world needs another podcast, we are here as Geekcast Radio's newest edition. And as the title says, each week we get lost in conversation about a wide range of topics, including movies, comics, games, art, TV, and even occasionally sports.
We play games and discuss pivotal topics like who would win in a fight, the Kool-Aid Man or Tony the Tiger, and examine the hot-button issues of the world of geekdom.
We keep things fresh by taking timeless topics in new directions. We are simply three friends having a fun time talking about life's most fascinating foibles.
Stay connected with us every Tuesday on iTunes or at geekcastradio.com.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 84. And because we went a little long with all the other stuff, instead of doing trailer talk now, we're just going to do the end of the show, and we'll do it as bonus content for this week. So be sure to be on the lookout for that, because like Blake mentioned, and to throw to this segment, I don't necessarily watch a ton of trailers. This is a good segment, though, to kind of get me into that a little bit more. So that, I think, will be a really fun discussion, so look out for that on bonus content this week. As far as this show, we'll end it here. Brendan, thanks for being here. Blake, awesome having the three of us under one roof.
For the first time for the InSession Film Sausage Factory. I am going to tweet it as.
Man, we have to come up with a better name, okay? Because this is the first time.
That
this was a fun
is the
thing.
name.
That is the name.
Okay, you're right. That can't be the name.
Surely, Blake, you have a better. a better name. You can come up with something.
I've got to at some point. I'm just kind of like drained right now from all this.
Hey, you came up with Liam Neeson with a Gum Part 6. You're clever.
I did. Well, I did, and I am.
Surely there's something there.
Don't call me Shirley.
Don't call me Shirley.
Wow.
Anyway, this has been a lot of
Walked right
fun.
into that.
This has been very cool. We definitely got to do this some more for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, that should do it for this week's show. Just a reminder real fast to be sure to go and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/InSessionFilm. Also follow us on Twitter at InSessionFilm and on Google Plus as well as YouTube. Just search InSession Film for both of those. And sign up for our monthly newsletter. You can do that on Facebook by clicking the newsletter tab or on our site at InSessionFilm.com/newsletter.
Just remember that all of our reviews are up on the website as well as Letterboxd, so check us out over there at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm. You know we try to respond to every piece of email we get, so send us a message over at InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes and Stitcher. Leave us some good reviews on there. You know how we're whores for publicity. But we greatly appreciate that. We really do. It means a lot to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, check out the new InSession Film store as well. Buy our stuff. That's all I'm going to say. It looks good. It'll look good on you.
Thank you.
I bought a tie.
Yeah, that's what I want to get. I definitely want to get the tie.
Exactly. There's lots of stuff like that. Anyway, but remember, you can always also check us out. There's a Listen Now page we have on the website here. That is InSessionFilm.com/listen-now.
And the InSession Film Podcast is supported by our super awesome listeners like you. If you want to help us, one way you can help us, as Blake just mentioned, new store, go buy some awesome stuff, tie, t-shirt, mug, all kinds of fun stuff. If you see something there that you'd like, let us know. We can make that happen for you. You can also listen to our bonus content. For example, this week when we do trailer talk, look for that for this week's bonus content. They are free to listen to, but we do encourage and appreciate a small donation of 99 cents. So you can definitely check that out at InSessionFilm.com as well. And if that doesn't suffice, just go to InSessionFilm.com/donate, and there's a whole bunch of other information there on how you can help us out. One thing I highly recommend and encourage is you can hear everything we do, whether it's our main shows, our extra film shows, or our lovely bonus content. You can hear that under one roof on our mobile app for just a one-time fee of $1.99. You can find that app on the Amazon Market for Android devices, the Windows 8 phone store for Windows devices, and the Podcast Box app for iOS devices. All those details are on the site at InSessionFilm.com/apps. As for next week on the show, the plan is to do Gone Girl, which should be pretty interesting. I'm pretty excited for that.
And I remember you said in the beginning of this show that we're going to do something happy, and that's not going to be happy.
That's not going to be happy, but maybe what we'll do is our top 3 will be nothing related to that, and we'll do our top 3 happy moments.
That's no fun.
Well, it depends, because Blake's had a rough week. If he has another rough week, we can't do another thing.
I wish I could describe the blank look in my soul right now.
Oh my God, blank and soul in the same sentence.
We could.
It's not the blank look in my face. I'm just kind of like.
We could do our favorite Ben Affleck moments that would make you happy.
Oh, the
that
guy
would make
from the
us
Fashionable
happy.
Mail.
Yes. I mean, that would be a little bit.
You see how I wrapped that up with a Kevin Smith thing at the end of this? See, you like that?
That's very good.
Game over at the end. Thanks, guys. I'm good.
I'll be here all day.
I can't actually end the show. I'm not allowed to.
I'm not allowed to, he says. Anyway, we'll think of a top 3, maybe favorite Ben Affleck moments. We'll figure that out. Next week, though, for our discussion segment, we're going to do a new segment called Over Under, and we're going to kind of do a monthly preview. We'll discuss the details of that next week on the show. All right, well, before we get out of here, any final thoughts on anything, fellas?
I guess not.
Brendan, you go.
I'm apparently really no final thoughts. This is just a really depressing talk, so I guess I'm quiet.
I need a puppy and some ice cream.
Well, maybe
and a good Lifetime movie.
I can send the wife to go get some ice cream for us. We can play with Dakota for a while, eat some ice cream, and we'll all spend some time together, the 3 of us.
Are you serious? Because I'm greatly looking forward to that.
I mean,
I'm sure we can do that. I can totally make that
ice cream. Okay.
Yeah. Ice cream party.
Hey, Brandy. So we're going to finish the show and go eat some ice cream.
Sweet.
Do you have any other final thoughts before we do that?
That's the best final thought ever. There is no more final thought than that. It is as final as it gets.
Strawberry. That's my final thought.
So, we're going to go eat some ice cream and hug each other. As far as...
What is it with you and hugs, man? No.
I love a good hug.
Listen,
I give them out for free all the time.
What are you, a big teddy bear or something? Is
I'm
that
a big teddy bear. Absolutely.
We're not going to hug. I promise you that.
I'm not going to hug you.
I'm not going to hug anybody.
No, I'm just going to eat ice cream and play with Dakota.
So-
I'm not, you can hug yourself.
Yeah, go hug yourself.
I can do that. As for extra film this week, Brendan and I are going to discuss The Two Faces of January and The One I Love, so also be sure to be on the lookout for that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Also, one last thing, make sure to stay tuned for our bonus content. Again, we're going to discuss Trailer Talk. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you guys next time on the InSession Film Podcast. For the entire version of our podcast, be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes or on Stitcher, or check us out online at InSessionFilm.com.